Welcome, everybody. Brother Dan Goodwin here, your host today on the Prophecy News program. And we have with us, as you can see, our guest again from last week, Dr. Charles Hiltebittle. And we're glad to have you. Thanks for coming in the studio again, preacher.
Thank you.
And, we're excited about today's program because last week we got going, but we didn't get as far as I wanted to. But I'm sure folks are enjoying it. Of course, we're here to talk about his new CD that he has with three messages. It's called Truths of Christmas, but I want you to know this isn't just for Christmas. This is Bible truth here. It just happens to revolve around the Christmas story as we know it, and he's going to blow away some of your traditions. I'm telling you, there's some stuff that he teaches us on here that we've had wrong for a lot of years in our traditional Christmas settings. And in case some of you haven't seen last week's program, I want you to know all of the Prophecy News programs are on YouTube, and you can go to prophecynews.com and look for the YouTube channel on their page, or just go on the internet and go to YouTube and type in Prophecy in the News in the search bar, and you can find it. Many of you maybe that watch on television don't realize that all these programs are recorded and they're placed on YouTube. You can go back years and watch a program. And so I want you to know that. So if you were not here last week and you didn't hear our program, let me just introduce our guest to you here. He's been in the ministry over 55 years. He's established some churches. He's pastored for many years, 20-some years in Texas. And he is involved in the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas, a place that I want to go see. Mm-hmm. And he's an author. He's written some books. Got a new book coming that I'm not going to tell you the title yet, but it's coming. And we're gonna, Lord willing, we're going to present that here with you and bring you back. I love the title. I wish I could tell everybody, but I'm not going to. I'm jealous. I want that. I want to write that book. But it's got a great little book, 120 or 30 pages or something like that, perfect size. And we're going to bring you back, and we're going to talk about that book on a later program if the Lord doesn't take us out of here before that.
Amen.
So that'd be okay if we go. And he's also, he lives in Raleigh, Illinois area, down in the land of Lincoln. And we won't get into it again, but you've got the Walk Through Time Ministries, and that's your slogan there.
Yes.
And I like that. We won't get into that again, but and you have you host the Issachar Report.
Yes.
Just like the Bible name Issachar. You can go to YouTube and find that as well. He has some YouTube programs there. So, all right, we're going to jump right into this thing again, and I'm going to ask you some questions. And by the way, I've listened to all three of these. Loved them. And I wrote down a lot of notes. I learned a lot, and I've been doing prophecy stuff for a lot of years. And I'm telling you, nobody gets it all, do they? Nobody gets it all. No. And you go to some country church sometime, and you sit in the back row and you listen, and that guy will say something. I never thought of that.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And God doesn't give it to everybody.
Amen.
I learned that a long time. Nobody's got it all. Amen. And you can't just put all your eggs in one, you don't just follow one guy.
Amen.
You can glean things from a lot of different guys.
True.
And sometimes even guys you don't agree with on some things. Sometimes they'll have something. But we're going to jump into some stuff here. The first thing I want to try not to repeat some of the stuff from the last program, but tell us about the genealogies. You bring this out, I think, right away on the first disc. The genealogies. There's two different genealogies, and people say it's a contradiction in the Bible. You got the Matthew 1 account. Where's the other one? Luke?
Luke 3.
Okay, Luke 3. You got a genealogy. It's the part everybody skips when they're reading through their Bible, And so-and-so begat so-and-so, and
right.
I'm guilty of that sometimes too. But yet there's nuggets in there.
Oh,
so
wonderful nuggets.
Explain to the viewers why the names are different in them two genealogies.
Matthew, of course, is writing presenting Jesus the King of the Jews.
Okay.
Luke is writing to present Jesus as the Son of Man. And so that's why Luke's genealogy starts there and goes backwards to Adam to God.
Okay.
But Matthew's account starts with Abraham and gives you 3 sets of 14 generations, brings you up to the birth. In Matthew's account, because Solomon was the king, but in Solomon's line, later, sin comes in and the kingship is broken.
Okay.
So over in Luke's account, you have the son of David, Nathan. So both Mary and Joseph are direct descendants of David. One's from Solomon, the other's from Nathan. And because that keeps the purity without the sin being broken. And so secondly, when you get to the 14th generation, according to rabbinical writing, that line that had been severed because of the sin problem now could be restored. So either one, Jesus was the King of the Jews.
All right. And so, to keep it simple, one of them is Mary's lineage.
Mary's lineage.
Which is which one?
Luke chapter
All right,
3.
So Luke is and that's going to lead on to my next question anyway, but
Yeah.
Luke is Mary's lineage.
Yes.
And Matthew is Joseph's lineage.
That's true.
And of course, I'm sure the viewers understand when they go up to the temple and they lose Jesus and all that.
Yeah.
It's interesting, the wording there. I must be about my Father's business. The word Father is not capitalized.
Yep.
And of course, no, I mean it is capitalized, meaning that Jesus is not talking about Joseph.
He's not talking about Joseph.
He's talking
at
about
all.
his father, who fathered him, which is God in heaven.
That's right.
And Joseph was his stepdad.
That's true.
All right, so that's interesting. So that's why the genealogies are different.
True.
Different lineages,
Yes.
but they both go back to David, and that's interesting. Okay, let's see. Much of our let's get into that then. There's something about Luke being written from the perspective of Mary. Tell us about that.
Well, it's obvious when you really look at it closely. Luke, in the first 2 chapters, Luke is setting down with Mary years after the fact. And what Luke is recording is Mary's recollection of the events.
Okay, now let's say this again. You're saying that Luke is actually speaking to Mary and getting her point of view.
Mary's giving the report.
I think that's interesting.
She's giving she could give the first-hand report of
I guess so.
And so the first 2 chapters of the book of Luke is Mary giving her recollection of the events, and Luke is recording
Luke
it.
is recording as if, now maybe he's actually talking to her, but if not, he's still giving her point of view.
Yes.
And very probably.
And very interesting also,
he's a
Dan.
doctor, right? They say.
Yes. Also, in the 27 Talmud, you find that the
Explain to the viewers what the Talmud is.
The Talmud is the historical documentation of rabbinical writings. And the number 27 supposedly is the year 27 A.D. But we understand that there's no such thing as a zero.
Yeah.
And so the number 27 might not be the exact year. What was happening? Jesus' ministry had just started. They commissioned Gamaliel to go and search it out. In the 27 Talmud, he sits down and talks with Mary, and Mary gives, and in the 27 Talmud, a very similar story of what you find in the book of Luke. And you'll also find in his report, he also goes and tracks down Melcher, who was the chief shepherd in charge of the Paschal lambs down at Bethlehem at the birth of Christ. And he gives a report very similar to what you find in Luke chapter 2 of the visitation of the angels.
Well, that's neat. And I don't know, I never thought of this before until I heard you say this on the disc. The fact that Luke was very probably, nobody knows for sure, but very probably sitting in a room with Mary and probably some others. They had more sense back in their day. I'm sure he wasn't sitting in a room by himself with her, like we would today and some people today. But actually getting firsthand from her detail, that's very thought-provoking to think about. Next time I read those chapters, I'm going to have that in mind. Mary's informing him.
Mary's giving him first-hand account.
Yeah. Now, in line with that, brings me to my next thing. You mentioned the Talmud in the 27, the date, and that nobody knows if that was the right date.
Yeah.
You seem to take the same view as I do about the 3 calendars, but I want the viewers to hear it from you. Tell us about the 3 calendars and why we shouldn't put our faith in any of these 3 calendars.
Oh, well, there are a lot of different reasons. The calendars, of course, you got the Jewish calendar that's set on the lunar scale, and Therefore, every 3 or 4 years, they got to add an extra month. Then you got the Julian calendar, the Gregorian calendar. And at the time of Christ, you had calendars from various parts of the world. Some of them had 21 months in them.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was no standardization of it at that time. And there's no way we say, well, AD and BC, before Christ and after Christ. Well, wait a minute. Are you after Christ at the birth, or after Christ at the Calvary's cross, or his resurrection? Where's it all at? So there's no way to know an exact year.
Now, this is 5778 on the Hebrew calendar,
True.
the Jewish calendar.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, everyone made a big deal of the 5777 year.
Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting, too. They're off over 200 years.
Yes.
And that was messed with.
On purpose.
I don't know if you studied that out.
Oh, yes, I have. They wanted to prove that in 133 AD, 132 and 133 AD, they wanted to prove that Daniel's prophecies were being fulfilled, the rebellion of this religious leader, this is our Messiah. So they took 3 of the kings out of the Persian calendar, altered even in their own history.
They fudged it.
They fudged it all. You ask them today, and the rabbis will say, yeah. And you say, well, how did they do? They said, well, God must have told them.
Yeah.
God didn't tell them,
Yeah.
So, yeah, the calendars are not reliable.
And places that I've read, people have said they did it to throw off the Christianity.
No, it had nothing to do with Christianity. It had to do, they wanted to prove that last rebellion that, of course, in 135 AD ended up in total crush, and Jerusalem's going to be covered with 15 feet of dirt, and the great dysphoria that took place. So, yeah, the calendars are not trustworthy.
Now, our calendar is not right either.
No.
At the date of this show, I think we're just at the beginning of 2019. I think this show is airing the week of New Year's. We're in the year 2019. I laugh at that because this is not 2019.
I'm not sure anybody knows exactly other than God.
Yeah, and of course, if you have a Schofield Reference Bible, if you have Ussher's dates in your Bible, you turn to Matthew 1, it'll say 4 BC. And I don't believe that that's right. No. I joke about that. Jesus was born 4 years before Jesus.
Yeah.
And because BC. You go to Genesis 1, and it says 4004 BC.
Yeah.
And I laugh at that too. That's Bishop Ussher back in.
But it gives you a proximity.
Right.
And a reference point to put other things together.
But here's the thing though. Our calendar, the New Testament, was started at the wrong place because they missed it. New Testament, a new covenant cannot happen until the death of the tester. Hebrews chapter 9.
Yeah.
Jesus didn't die at his birth. The New Testament didn't begin until after the cross.
Yeah.
Now, that's an important thing for folks to understand. And that changes everything about what happened in the gospel. The Gospels are Old Testament. Now, people roll their eyes. People, they've never heard this stuff before. The New Testament began at the death with the blood. The blood had to be shed.
Yes, sir.
So we can't trust our calendar. This is not 2018. No. I believe there's going to be 2,000 years in the church age. Now, this is my belief, and I write about this. I believe there'll be 2,000 years in the church age. I believe there'll be 4,000 years in the Old Testament. I think the Old Testament ended somewhere at the cross or somewhere thereabouts, or with Stephen, and I believe it was the year 3993. No disrespect to you, Bishop Ussher, who gave us the dates, but I think you're off a few years. But I think the 7 years missing, obviously, is the final week of Daniel 9, the 70th week.
Oh, it's definitely.
And those 70 weeks are Old Testament, every one of them. And we haven't had the 70th yet.
Nope.
That's the tribulation.
Yes.
And it finishes off, I believe, the Old Testament. So, anyway, just to tell folks, you can't trust any of the calendars.
No.
We don't know what year this is. There's no way to know. And we can't know for sure where we are on the Jubilee cycles, the sabbatical cycles, and all that. There's no record in the Bible that I know of them ever keeping a Jubilee. If there's record, I haven't seen it. There's a couple places people think that they might have celebrated one, but certainly in the last few thousand years, there's no record
not been.
of it. And so let's move on to something else here. Well, let me tell the folks how they can get it, and then we're going to talk about the tradition and where this started way back in hundreds of years ago. But while you're thinking on that, this is the disc that we're talking about that Brother Hilterbill has put out. There are 3 CD, audio CD. These are not DVD. These are audio. You put in your CD player. It's called Truths of Christmas. But it's not just for Christmas now. These are things concerning the birth of Christ and the shepherds and the wise men and the taxes and a whole bunch of things. 3 full-length CD discs on here. I listened to all 3 of them. I enjoyed them. Good quality. I was very happy when I put them in my player and got to hear them. So you can get these by going to the website you see on your screen, crossingnews.com, or you can call the 800 number on your screen during business hours, and they'll be happy to take your order over the phone. I want to tell you might want to consider getting the Crossing News magazine, the monthly magazine that comes out. I personally get that in my mail every month. You can get it in digital format. You can read it online, or you can get it in your mailbox like old people like me do. And I like paper in my hand. And I would encourage you to get the Crossing News magazine. I believe Brother Hilterbill is going to have an article in there coming up pretty soon. And I write for the magazine often. Dr. Clarkson has an article. I think he's in there every month. And there's just good stuff in there. And I would encourage you to get that magazine and order that. Good articles and good information in there. Okay, so that's that. Now, Dr. Hilterbill, tradition. We've grown up with traditions, and I like traditions, but we got to realize a lot of our traditions are not biblical. Right. And we set up a manger scene. I think we probably have one at our house. I'm confessing. I know that the manger scene's not accurate. I've known for many years, I've known that the manger scene that we use is not biblically accurate, the timing and all that. But it's tradition. And, different people have different Christmas traditions. But a lot of the traditions that we have concerning the Christmas and the Christmas story and what we believe about the events, you talk about that on one of the CDs in here, where it came from and where it started. Share that with us.
Well, in the years of Constantine's rule,
he goes way back 300 AD.
In the 300s. His wife just supposedly found a cave, and she says that's where Jesus was born.
Really?
So they
just
built
like
just like that, and they built him a shrine around it. It's still there today. And
charge entrance fees to come see it. Oh,
then they built a city around it. Anyway, Bethlehem of today. None of that's factual. None of that's the truth.
Okay, so that and probably many other things.
Yes.
Just like a lot of religious stuff today comes out of tradition from back then.
The original Bethlehem is a few miles away from that, just across the valley from Rachel's tomb.
Okay.
And there you'll find the gates of the city. We have uncovered the gates of the city. The Well of David is just a few 100 yards away. Boaz's threshing floor is about 80 yards away from the gates.
Isn't it something how the Bible stories that we all read, it's all right there.
It's all in a very small area.
Now, with that in mind, because we've only got about 8 or 9 minutes left, I want to get to this stuff about the shepherds.
Yes.
And the swaddling cloth or clothes.
Yes.
I just want to turn you, because you and I have talked about this in the hotel room, and I think we talked a little bit about it in an update. I want to end the program. I just want to let you go. I want you to get, because the Bible talks about the shepherds in the field.
Right.
The angels come. Talks about, you'll find him in a manger with wrapped in swaddling
Well, Mary
clothes.
and Joseph, when they show up to pay the tax, hundreds and hundreds of David's extended family are there to pay their tax. They have 1 week. And so she needs to have a privacy. So in order to be able to do that, there's no room in the inn there at Boaz's threshing floor.
And the inn is not a hotel,
No.
It's a hole in the ground.
And even yet today, David's family crest, about this big around, is still etched in the stone above that property there. And all they had to do was go up the hill about 80 paces, and you come to the Tower of the Flock. But see, the Bible had already said in Micah chapter 4 and verse number 8, under the old Tower of the Flock shall he come, even the first dominion.
So it was prophesied.
It was
that
already
he would
prophesied.
be born
He would
there.
be born there.
And that's where the lambs were.
And that's the reason. And then the next verses say the shepherds were abiding, keeping watch over their flocks, nearby on the hills nearby, the hills of Ramon. And from the David's day of taking Jerusalem and establishing the priesthood again with the new tabernacle and then the temple, he had the 24 courses of the priesthood. And also he took some of those and made them sanctified shepherds, so that they could provide the continual sacrificial lambs properly done for sacrifice, especially the
These
Paschal
shepherds
lambs.
aren't like we've all been preaching. They're not just out there and these are
No.
their sheep and they're working. It's their job.
No,
They're hired. These are people who work for the.
they were religiously trained,
Okay.
and they were watching over the lambs from which come the Paschal lambs of sacrifice.
So the Passover lamb every year would be chosen from some of their flocks.
The Passover lamb would be born the 1st of Nisan,
Okay.
and then he'd be 1 year old the next year. Then he could be out of those males born that they could be, one of those would be the Passover lamb.
Mm-hmm.
So they're watching over their flocks. And the angel said, unto you is born this day in the city of David what? A Savior. They understood that because they're looking forward to the Messiah,
Right.
all of these lambs that they're dealing with. So when a ewe lamb was ready to give birth, and we know it has to be in the spring because it's the lambing season is always in the spring, never in December, always in the spring. And so it's lambing time. They take that ewe into the tower of the flock, and there that baby is born, and they catch it. They wipe it off with a swaddling cloth.
Now, before you get into the swaddling cloth, if I'm a little confused, they're probably confused too.
Okay?
Explain this tower of the flock.
It was
Help us understand.
It was
this.
called the Tower of Edor, and you'll find in the 35th chapter of of Genesis, that's where Jacob is going to settle down because his wife has just died, and he settles down, the Bible says, beyond the Tower of Edor. It was a Jebusite outpost, military. But now under David, the borders of Israel are miles away.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to call it the Tower of the Flock, because now all out of this is where the birth is going to take place for the sacrificial lambs.
So what's at this place? I mean, I'm thinking of a tower in my mind.
It's 3-storied. It had the bottom layer was where they would bring the animals in. When it was called the Tower of Edor, it was a military outpost. This is where they garrisoned their horses and things of that nature. Then the troops on that level, and then the upper was an outpost where you could look. From this point, you can see many, many miles in 3 different directions, and you could see invading armies coming. That was its original purpose, but they don't need it for that now. So David makes it the Tower of the Flock.
All right, and they would bring the sheep there.
They would bring the ewe lamb in, the ewe in, and the lambs is born. They're caught. They're carried into an inner chamber.
So the lambs actually, when they're getting ready to give birth, or whatever you call that with the sheep, do they bring them there to give birth? Or
Yeah, they bring the ewe in to give birth. The baby lamb is caught. It's carried to an inner chamber. It's inspected for spot and blemish. And if it's a qualified candidate for sacrifice, each of its limbs is wrapped with a swaddling cloth, its body up to its face, set aside for the prescribed days, re-inspected, and then it would be a qualified candidate for sacrifice.
Swaddling cloth? What's that?
They
all
were
about?
just what we would call rags that had been ceremonially cleaned and used to wrap the body in.
Just to keep the lamb
To protect
warm
it.
so it won't die in the
And to
cold.
protect it. And so when the angels came to the shepherds, they said, "This shall be a sign unto you.
Right.
You'll find the babe, 2 things, wrapped in swaddling cloths, lying in a manger." They knew exactly where to go. That's why the next verse, verse 15, says, "And they came with haste."
Yeah.
Because they didn't run all over Bethlehem knocking on somebody's innkeeper door. There's a baby been born out back.
Now, since they were the stewards who brought the sheep there, or
Yes.
whatever.
The lambs.
So
were
they already
born.
knew where it was, and it couldn't have been far.
No.
If they were to bring if a sheep was getting ready to have its lamb,
Yeah, they were just on the
they had
hillsides.
to be pretty close.
Yeah.
So,
And so they come up to the hill, come in the Tower of the Flock, and they find Joseph and Mary and the babe lying in the manger.
I've read that 100 times, and I never once asked myself, how did they know where to go? It just never came
Yep.
to me until I listened to these.
Yeah. They knew exactly where.
How did they know what the angel meant?
Yeah,
And that's how
he
they
said.
knew.
The angel said it'll be a sign unto you, and so they knew where to find swaddling cloths. They knew what the manger was, and especially when they knew a Savior was born. Hey, that's just what our Paschal Lambs is looking forward to. Let me help you with this. Jesus was born in the exact same place that for 1,000 years all the Paschal Lambs that represented him had been born.
Wow.
No wonder John said, "Behold the Lamb of God." John didn't say, "Behold the Lion of the tribe of Judah."
Right.
He said, "Behold the Lamb of God, which taketh away the sin of the world." Jesus was wrapped in the same clothes, laid in the same manger that all the Paschal Lambs that represented him had been for 1,000 years.
Wow.
What an awesome God. Keeps everything to the minute detail.
Now, we don't have much time left. This gets a little deep, but my wheels are turning up here. It sounds like Joseph and Mary maybe didn't understand that prophecy in Micah because they were looking for a place.
That's right.
And they wound up there, but maybe that wasn't where they chose. It's just where they wound up.
I'm sure when they got there, they had anticipated being able to use the inn. But there's so many people and already around there, all they had to do was go up the hill.
Wow.
It's right there.
Well, this is exciting stuff, and we're out of time. And
a lot more to the story.
There's a lot more. Of course, There's 3 discs. There's at least like 45 minutes on each one. I don't know what exactly, but go to the website. I'm giving my website, prophecynews.com, and you can get a copy for yourself. And I know you're going to enjoy it. In the minute we have left, Doc, tell the listener that maybe doesn't know for sure where they're going when they die. Tell them what this means to them. You only got about a minute.
What it means is this. God loved us so much that he sent his only begotten Son to go to Calvary's cross. God had promised from the fall of man a Redeemer was coming. Somebody going to crush the head of the old devil. I'm certainly glad God loved us to that point. So Jesus came, fulfilled all the prophecies, lived a life fulfilling all the prophecies, and fulfilled the promise of redemption. And he provided the full payment of the ransom price of our sin. What we have to do is realize we're a lost person. Without God's help, we have no hope. But while we were yet sinners, God loved us to the point he sent his only begotten Son. He said that whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be saved. I hear people say, I can't believe a loving God would send people to hell. God doesn't send us to hell. We're born headed to hell.
Amen.
God sent us his Son so we could change our destiny from hell to heaven by receiving the free gift of salvation.
Thank you so much, Doc, for coming on the program today and helping us all to keep looking up.